Thank you, Amra. As Amra said, I'm here to talk about value streams and why they aren't just about flow. My name is Helen Beale, as Amra said, and I am joining us from Flowtopia today. I do actually wear quite a number of different hats. I'm an independent consultant, effectively. I also head up the Community and Ambassador Programme at PeopleCert, who own DevOps Institute, which is where I sort of originated from in that world, and also ITIL and Prince2 and Language Cert. I also do quite a lot of research. I was the lead author for the State of VSM reports, the State of Availability report, and I am an adjunct researcher analyst at IDC. I do a lot of writing in my daily work, but today we're here to talk about my passion around value streams. So when I talk about value stream management, I often talk about the fact that it falls into two dimensions. There's two parts to it. One is the flow part and the other is the value realization. And as my title suggests, when I say that value streams are not just about flow, I really want to draw out the differences between those two things today and how they really affect us in the world of resilience and why we should care when we're focused on anti-fragility and stability. So let's dive into both of them in a bit more detail. So flow really is about efficiency. It's about not having waste in our value stream. It's about having a very healthy value stream that's very friction free, but it's mainly focused on outputs, whereas value realization is really about the effectiveness of the work that we do. So it's much more measured by outcomes in the case of, or in the pursuit of very positive customer experiences. So flow is the journey of that work from the idea to when the customer receives it. But the realization is what happens when that customer receives it and how it influences or affects their experience and therefore their behavior. So it's really about delivering on their desires and creating the outcomes that they're looking for. So we measure these things in slightly different ways as well. So when we talk about flow and efficiency, we really care about flow time, so cycle time and lead time. Those are quite difficult metrics actually for a lot of people because lots of people and practitioners measure them in different ways. And we'll keep on coming back to this idea that different practitioners have different definitions. We also talk about velocity and throughput and efficiency and frequency. We talk about accelerating things a lot. And we talk a little bit more about kind of what the work profile looks like. So the different types of work that we might be doing. So for example, in a sprint, we might classify user stories or PBIs, product backlog items, in different ways. And we might say, well, that's a new feature. That's us paying down some technical debt. That's us dealing with some risk in our value stream. There are different ways that we can classify things. But when we're thinking about the work and the actual impact it has on the people for whom it's designed, we think about different things. We think about how the service or product or application or feature is being used. So we really look at the patterns of the customer consumption of that thing that we've done. We look at it from a business perspective. So we often have a goal that isn't just to make our customers' lives wonderful, but to consequently bring us more resources in order that we can continue doing great things. So the way we often measure this is conversion rate. So for example, it could be somebody coming to a website and completing a form and submitting a form and therefore going into a sales process or into a customer journey. And, you know, that form could be a mortgage application or it could be actually something more to do with purchasing an actual product or a service. Many of you are probably very used to customer satisfaction and NPS, Net Promoter Score and things like that. But we also care about referrals, reviews and retention. In some businesses I work with, increasingly we care about those things. And they're very interesting. We'll probably come back to these a bit later, but I find this a particularly interesting set of customer experience or outcome-based metrics because when we talk about NPS in particular, it's a very laggardy metric, and in which I mean it's a lagging indicator. So something will happen now, and then we'll ask a customer several weeks, months down the line, would you recommend us to other people, your friends and family? And that's the NPS. Whereas the referrals and the reviews, they tend to be a lot sooner, a lot more immediate. And of course, the transactional usage and conversion metrics are very much leading metrics. So there's a number of different ways we can do this, but let's start this talk with this idea that we have these two dimensions. But let's talk a little bit more about where all this value stream knowledge is coming from and where these practices have come from. So I love referring back to this book in 1915, and actually if we get all sort of historian about value stream management, we can go much further back to the 1400s to places like the Arsenal in Venice, and looking at emerging materials and flow diagrams from there. But I particularly like what Charles Edward Knuppel said in this book about flying blind. And what he was basically saying is, if we don't have the ability to measure what our work is costing you and how we're performing as well, so if we don't have these time study methods, then we're effectively flying blind. So the time study method is saying, what tasks are we doing in what time frame, and what do we expect the outcome, the performance should be of them. So in many respects, even though sometimes you might feel that this is kind of a new way of thinking, it's not a way that you've worked with before, it's something that has been emerging in industry for quite a long time. Commonly, when we talk about lean, and particularly in the context of the value stream and value stream management principles, we come back to TPS, the Toyota Production System, and the 1950s, what was happening in Japan, and just a bit before that, what was happening in the USA with Ford. And what you're seeing here is actually some materials flow, a bit like an early Kanban board. So you're seeing people here managing work, using cards, and tracking work in progress in that way. So this is very much value streams and flow in the manufacturing industry, which is where a lot of this comes from. Now, as I said earlier, my background is in the software technology industry, particularly in DevOps, and we have really made this conversion from manufacturing to software quite wholeheartedly in the world of value streams, because one of the problems that we have in the digital value stream is the invisibility of software. It's just code, and whilst we sometimes create front ends and GUIs and things like that, a lot of it is invisible, but we can take a lot of what we've learned in the visible, tangible manufacturing value stream and apply those same principles in many respects. And this is kind of when we're getting into, or where we're getting towards in 95 with this great book called The Great Transition from James Martin. And the Great Transition book really talks about the incoming internet and how this is going to fundamentally change the way that organisations operate, and how they're going to change around basically from waterfall to agile. So this is like a precursor, an early warning that this is going to happen. So this transformation is a paradigm shift of immense magnitude, said James, and he forecast as well that some corporations will take the new opportunities and thrive, and others will be swept away. And of course, if you look at things like the S&P and Dow Jones, the different stock market groupings and things, you'll see over the last 20, 40 years, we've seen huge shifts in terms of companies coming out of nowhere. Of course, the Amazons, the Apples, the Googles, Alphabets, the Metas have come, from a place where they didn't really exist in 1995, and then some of the big players, and then the IBMs, some of the world's biggest companies, then are no longer in those sort of top 10 or 50 that we see now. So a huge amount of change has happened due to the digital transformation of the world and the need to operate in different ways. And the Great Transition talks about how to change your operating model to a value stream oriented one. A bit more recently again, I referenced Amazon just a second ago, and this is Adrian Cockcroft from Amazon or AWS talking about actually Netflix transition to the cloud, and talking about time to value, a metric that he sort of coined around 2011 and really popped up a bit later in the cloud computing sort of ebooks that he was writing around 2019. But what Adrian said here is the most critical metric is how long it takes for an innovative idea to reach customer. This is time to value. This is flow. It's still flow. But what he's saying is that you can't compete in the digital economy if you're too slow. And I'm going to conflate digital and AI economy today. I will try and pull out AI as well, but basically when I talk about these economies, I'm talking about the AI economy as well. And then around 2018, we saw this book come out, From Project to Product, again, reflecting on what James Martin was saying about the need to move from waterfall to agile. But what this book does is it starts to introduce metrics for flow, which is what you've got on the left-hand side. So we've already talked about a couple of these in the context of value stream. So the flow velocity, so your time to value, how quickly you can get one idea from idea to the customer's hands. The efficiency, like how much waste you've actually got. So it's great. We know our time to value is 10 days, for example, but are all 10 days useful, or are 5 days of that 10 days sitting around being idle, doing nothing, waiting for something else to happen? The flow time really is about like how long that takes. So our 10 days, the flow velocity is actually how many things we can get through in 10 days. So can we get 5 items through or 10 items through in 10 days? And our flow load is like, where are we at? How many things have we got in process at any one time? And how is that affecting things for us? So this is where we're really delving into things like Little's Law and queuing theory, and understanding that if we have too much work in progress, it can often really slow everything down. So this is, again, I mentioned Kanban earlier when we were looking at the Taichi Ono picture, or the picture of the TPS Kanban board, this idea that we can throttle or minimize work in progress to ensure that we get things through as fast as we can, and we aren't causing lots of queuing problems. But what's interesting about this book as well, From Project to Product, which is really talking about, again, the waterfall to agile transition that James was talking about, is on what you can see on the right here is business results as well. So, and the top one is value. But what this is value from the business perspective, not the customer perspective, which is another context or concept I will keep coming back. We're also talking about cost. So this actually goes back to Charles Knuppel as well, talking about how can we know how we're performing if we don't know what it costs, what the outcomes are, and what we were trying to achieve in the middle anyway. And quality and happiness, so that customer satisfaction we talked about earlier. There's also this idea of the flow distribution. So this is what I was talking about a moment ago when I was saying that we can categorize work in different ways. So it could be a new feature in our sprint. This user story is a new feature, or it could be we're trying to fix a bug from the last release or last year's release. Doesn't really matter. It's just a bug fix. Or we're trying to anticipate a new compliance or a new risk. You know, we know that there's a problem with these two items using the same microservice, or we know we've got a GDPR change, or we've got a DORA compliance issue coming through, or it could be technical debt. We know that, we're still carrying, we need to update that software component because it has a vulnerability that's just become evident and it needs an update now. So we could be paying down technical debt in that way. So what we have here, and you can see on the right that I've actually flagged this as both flow and realization, because we've got the flow metrics on the left and we've got the business results on the right. So we're starting to understand that these things come together. Now, when we're talking about resilience in particular, all of these elements of the flow distribution work types matter. So it could be a new feature that we're trying to install, and that new feature might be, for example, a new AI-generated method of understanding the vulnerabilities in our live performance, our live instance of our application. It could be a defect, so it could be, it could be that vulnerability, or it could be, we know that we've got a leakage and it's causing us a lot of performance issues, which we're constantly having to fix. So we could actually be, maybe we're killing two birds with one stone, then we're seeing that as a technical debt, and we're implementing an AI agent that will automatically remedy that performance problem while we get to the bottom of it and fix it in the infrastructure. And it could be a risk that's anticipated. So again, our AI could be at play here, and it could be, for example, analysing our release mechanisms and our release history and saying, actually, that team over here have got a history of having problems when they're doing releases at the same time as that team over here. So the AI is flagging a potential risk and we as humans are going to intervene and do something about it that perhaps the generative AI is going to suggest to us would be a good idea. Perhaps do some kind of progressive deployment, or do some extra test steps before we move forward. But there's a lot here to consider in terms of how to connect these two things. And around this same time, we had this emergence or re-emergence of value stream management, triggered by a number of things. One was the fact that we had 15 years of DevOps under our belt. So we had been automating tool chains from idea to customer realization, or customer through production to the customer having the item in their hands for about 15 years. And consequently, there was an emergence of a new type of software that was being designed specifically to tackle the value stream in this way, the digital value stream. And actually, the book that we just were referring to on the previous slide, From Project to Product by Dr. Mick Kirsten. Dr. Mick Kirsten founded TaskTop, who subsequently have been acquired by PlanView, but were one of the very big players in this area, as you can see on this the slide here, the diagram from this Forrester Wave, where Forrester being the industry analyst that produced this report on value stream management solutions, and the one that you have the clip from here is actually from Q2 2025, and in that you can see in the top right section under leaders we have PlanView, who acquired TaskTop, and various other vendors who were producing software and who are producing software to help people analyse their value streams in this way. And Forrester came up with this definition back in 2018 when they first started doing these wave reports on value stream management, that value stream management is this combination of people, process and technology, so nice and familiar with us, people, process, tools, maps, optimises, visualises, measures and governs business value flow through heterogeneous software delivery pipelines from idea through development into production. So there's a lot there, but I want to pick out the flow. So this definition is flow oriented, not realization oriented. It doesn't take us through to the customer, it only takes us to production. And it only talks about business value, it doesn't talk about customer experience. So there are some limitations on this definition. And as I said earlier, this is a common theme in this presentation, the definitions of things do matter. A lot of us in our industry and other people's industries understandably get frustrated and short-tempered with jargon. But jargon and buzzwords are annoying, but we do need labels, because we do need to know what we're talking about. We need to know that that's duck and that's a frog and that's an orange. So we do need to have words where everybody understands the meaning. But as I said earlier, for example, with lead and cycle time, those are definitions that vary across practitioners. But all is not lost. The key really is to ensure that the people that you're working with, you share a common language and a common vocabulary when it comes to these different nouns, verbs, processes, policies and approaches. This is difficult though, and if we bring this back round to value realisation, so let's say, okay, let's park flow for a little while. We've explored that, we understand that, you know, a lot of people understood that as we moved into the digital AI era, we needed to move fast, we needed to accelerate, be more efficient, to compete and all of that. We also know there is this other side of things where we need to measure the importance of what we're doing, not just the speed, but the impact. And this is what value is. But value is notoriously fluffy, nebulous, difficult to grasp. And value really is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, it sounds like such a hackneyed phrase, and obviously I've twisted it from beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but it really is like what's valuable to you might not be valuable to me. What's valuable to Netflix won't be valuable to UBS. What's valuable to UBS won't be valuable to Toyota. So everything is slightly different. So, and in those instances, I've kind of talked about value in the context of the person creating the value. But of course, the beholder, the consumer of the value, the customer, the citizen might have a completely different view as well. And what we may think is a good thing from a business perspective isn't always the thing that the person we're trying to serve wants. So this is part of the battle within an organisation, is to really pin down what value or what the outcomes are that you're looking for. So one of the things that we've been doing at Flowtopia over the several years is trying to understand more using the research estate VSM reports that I've talked about that we conducted for several years. And one of the things that we asked was about which value metrics people measured. Now, this is very much from a digital value stream perspective. So we have been traditionally at Flowtopia quite digital value stream oriented, because that's the world that we live in. As we established with James Martin's book in 1995, we live in a world where software was eating the world, according to Mark Anderson, is now eaten the world, and perhaps AI is having the world's dessert. But we have moved forward a lot, and whilst not organisations are pure digital and not all organisations were born digital, as we established, the way that market valuations and company earnings show us the landscape has changed, is that those organisations that are software oriented or technology centric or technology focused organisations perform better. So we have many examples of Domino's, for example, Domino's Pizza saying they're a technology company, Alaska Air saying they're a technology company with wings. Lots of organisations that are not traditionally technology have understood that their digital capabilities is what makes them survive or thrive in this world. So whilst an airline is making money by putting people on aircraft and flying them around the world, the digital systems that support that from a booking perspective, from an aircraft fleet pilot management perspective, are all essential to their ongoing success. I labour this point because most of these value metrics we talk about here are to do with the digital interface. So we care about things like the amount of visitors, the amount of users that are being acquired, the stickiness of a site, how long people are spending on things, the reviews. So there's a number of different suggested value metrics that we can use here, which are generic. So contrary to that idea that value is in the eye of the beholder, in a digital system, we can measure the performance of a digital system through customer experience using a set of metrics that are common to all digital environments. The customer journey. The customer journey changes from whether I'm trying to buy a Rolls-Royce or whether I'm trying to download a program to watch on an aircraft. But they're customer journeys nonetheless, and they start and they finish and they have steps in between, and we can measure them. Feature usage. Doesn't matter whether it's me trying to trade in my air miles or whether it's me trying to upgrade the software in my BMW. It's still feature usage, and we can measure whether our features are being used and by what proportion of users they're being used by. So that's great. This is wonderful. We have lots of metrics we can use. But what happened year over year is that these bigger metrics, or the ones that most people were doing, were often the sales and the revenue and the profit margin. Now we can see here that we've actually got feature users and active users are pretty high as well, which is great news. But I like to pick on sales revenue and profit margin because, harking back to that comment I made earlier, the difference between leading and lagging metrics. So sales revenue and profit margin are very much lagging metrics. So in most cases. So they tell us about stuff that's happened later. They're not directly about customer experience. And this is where the conversation about value realization can fork as well. It's like, are we talking about the business value or are we talking about the customer value? And I sit in the camp that says we should focus on creating great customer experience, focus on customer value. If we do that, the customers will come. They will refer us to their friends. They will write great reviews about us. They'll continue to buy our product. They'll renew their subscriptions. They'll buy more things from us if we have them to offer. That will make us successful. There is a business caveat, of course, though, because nothing is in life is that simple and that disconnected. Everything is connected. Everything changes and everything is connected. So in this case, what we're saying is that those customer experience. You could create like the best customer experience in the world, but if you've got your business model wrong, if you're not charging enough and you're spending huge amounts on developing this incredible product and people are buying it, but they're only paying a penny for it, and really you need £3 for it because that's what you're paying your developers and the other people in your organisation that's making it run, then you'll come unstuck. And I guess, this is why things like venture capitalists are so important, because when we come up with brand new ideas that are going to be wonderful, we need to invest a lot of effort in creating those wonderful ideas and making them wonderful before people buy them, before we have the money to make them sustainable. So there are a few elements at play here. There is customer value, there is business value, and there is sustainability. And what will often happen in existing organisations is you'll have things like the cash cow. You'll have the product that was developed a long time ago. It's got a nice run rate from it. It's got annual revenue renewing year on year on year. And that allows you to place bets on either improvements in the cash cow or diversification into new products and services that will future-proof you. But if we focus purely on sales, revenue and profit and margin, we're not really hearing about that customer experience and that customer value now. We are reporting back to the market, reporting back potentially to our stakeholders, our shareholders and those people, but not directly to our customer. But we do have the ability with these digital tools and digital levers to really understand what is happening when we make a change. So getting that very fast feedback, really shortening that feedback loop. So for audience that are familiar with DevOps, you'll know about the 3 ways. If you're not familiar with DevOps and you don't know about the 3 ways, the first way is about flow, which we're familiar with from left to right, accelerating that flow. The second way is about shortening and amplifying the feedback loop. So getting to hear quickly what the customer thought. And the third way is about continuous experimentation and learning. So taking that feedback, listening to it, doing another experiment and learning from that over and over and over. So if you're familiar with Kata, another lean mechanism, you'll know about experimentation. Even if you're familiar with Agile, you'll know about empiricism and experimentation. So you'll know that this is a good approach. So what I'm really saying here is there are lots of ways to measure value. They don't have to be sales, revenue and profit margin. In fact, for many organisations, they are not that helpful because they're lagging indicators. There is one exception that always comes into my mind when I talk about this, which is a gaming company that I worked with. So they were doing online betting for sports, so for particular sports events. And what they were able to do is while a sports event was live, so for example, it could be a Rugby World Cup, they could offer new bets or change various features on their platform and they could immediately see the impact on the revenue. But it's quite rare that someone can see an impact that quickly for their environment. I mean, even a Netflix, they release a new movie. It takes a few days really to see what the impact is. They might release a feature where, people can put more things on their wish list or more recommendations, whatever it is. And it takes a little while to see the impact of that on revenue. And, is it people cancelling their subscriptions or is it people recommending other people buy them and upping the revenue? So they're very lagging often, those mechanisms, but those other ones are not. The other ones tell us a lot immediately. So let's talk about what a value stream looks like and whether you've got them. So first of all, you've got value streams. So it doesn't matter whether you're a one-man band or you work for an organisation that's got 500,000 people in it. If you have a customer, you have a value stream. If you're thinking, well, I'm in government, so I don't have customers, you have citizens. You are serving somebody. There is not really a business or an organisation in the world that doesn't serve somebody or deliver something. That's how capitalism works. We create things, people give us resources from it. It's how it's worked since the dawn of time, whether it was a shell on the beach or a cabbage you grew in your backyard. There is something exchanging hands, value exchanging hands. Now, a value stream, it always has a customer. It could be anything that delivers a product or a service. It starts with the idea and it finishes with that idea going into the customer's hands and the value being recognised. So whether you call them value streams or not, whether you have identified them, made them visible, mapped them, worked on them in any way, doesn't matter. Those value streams exist in your organisation. The problem that most people have is their value streams are very fragmented. The people in them are very siloed and there's loads of handoffs between them. So they're very slow. They're not efficient. The flow isn't good. And they often don't understand what they're delivering and what is actually happening in the customer's environment. So that's our value stream. And then we've got value chains, and then we've got value stream network. So value stream network is, for me, the next most interesting one, which is actually effectively the concept that your whole organisation is made up of value streams. And in most organisations, those value streams will not be independent of one another. As I said, everything is interconnected. Everything is connected. The value streams cross over. They have dependencies. It's part of life. In DevOps, we have a mantra we use often, which is don't manage dependencies, break them. But the reality is that those dependencies exist because of the way that humans work, the way that we collaborate together, the way that we don't want to duplicate effort, the way that we create systems that interconnect and rely on each other. So even if we try and create autonomy within all of our value streams and all of our systems, even if we embrace Conway's law from the perspective that we want to create lots of independent areas, and the way that they interconnect and interface will be greatly controlled. The fact is, an organisation is a value stream network. It's a collection of value streams, and some of them will have connections to each other and dependencies on each other. The value chain gets a bit more complicated, and actually we're having increasing numbers of conversations about the boundaries of value streams, value chains and value stream networks in particular. And I refer you back to my earlier comments about the difficulties of definitions, particularly around things like lead time and cycle time, and now around things like value chain and value stream networks. So a value chain is often considered to be sort of the supplier-customer relationship. So it's when those value streams stretch in and out of organisations, but it could be the connection of multiple value streams in an organisation as well. Again, what's the important thing? The important thing is that you and your colleagues know what you mean when you say one of these things. So let's talk about what a value stream actually might look like. So first of all, if any of you have done value stream mapping, you've probably drawn out a very linear thing. If you've drawn out an SDLC or a software delivery lifecycle, you've probably drawn it in a long line of steps or processes. And that's how I used to draw them as well, until I was presenting on DevOps several years ago and someone said, that's not very DevOpsy. And it was around the time that the infinity loop became very popular with DevOps people. And I never liked the infinity loop. And the reason I didn't was because on one side it had dev and on the other side it had ops. And the whole point was that we were trying to connect these two things, the software development people that were embracing Agile and had increased their cadence of delivery. And we were trying to connect this to the IT operations people that hadn't yet caught up with Agile and were getting increasingly frustrated and dismayed when they were thrown bits of software over the wall of confusion, as we used to refer to it. And they were then getting these far too often, didn't know what to do with them. And that's where DevOps really came from. So I started drawing DevOps as a circle because I wanted to blur the lines between Dev and Ops, so DevOps. And I carried on using this, as you'll see, as we move forward. And actually I use this when I even draw out a tool chain, as you'll see in a moment with my clients. So we start with the idea. So we start with the portfolio and backlog here. So this is where our strategy defines our vision, and we set our high-level goals, and then we cascade that down an organisation, typically, if we're hierarchical, where we break up our strategy or our vision, and we break down how we're going to deliver that into smaller bits. And at this point, we should be defining hypotheses. So we should be saying, we expect doing this work will make our system more stable. We expect doing this work will make us more performant. We expect doing this work will make our customer much happier. And we can measure all of this in both percentage improvement or time, or potentially a collection of both. I say time, so for example, it might be an improvement on, like, we're going to improve MTTR, I mean time to resolution, by 15%. And then our second time measurement was we're going to do that by July. So we will reduce MTTR by 15% by July. Could be something that we're doing at this portfolio and backlog level, and then breaking down how we're going to do that. So it could be we're going to implement an AI agent that will refer to our 3 different monitoring systems and identify exactly what the problem is, and automatically create a ticket and auto remediate. So that's where we have our ideas, but then we have to execute them. So this is where we go into the continuous integration or build part of the value stream, where we create or we compose code, and increasingly we're using Copilot or companion tools to help us. This is one of the most effective areas actually of generative AI, most accurate areas at the moment, is this coding area. And we incorporate our artifacts, we take them out of the different repositories, we control our versions, and we build our code in a trunk-based manner. And we do that because if we're using trunk-based development, we are committing code. Every developer is committing code at least once daily, and every time they do that, we're doing the tests. So we're automating the build and doing these automated tests. Again, AI here gives us lots and lots of capability in terms of writing and running tests and creating great test coverage for both functional and non-functional testing, non-functional being particularly important for when we are building resilience into our systems. And they do this at every step or gate through the route to live. So from development through any staging servers into the production environments. Doing that continuous integration where our developers are at least daily committing their feature branch to trunk and doing these automated builds and tests puts us in a place where we can do continuous delivery and continuous deployment if we want it. And this is the point where this boundary is crossed and our work releases itself into the wild, which sounds a bit crazy, but of course we're doing that. It could be a human intervention, it could be an AI intervention, it could be continuous deployment if we are proven that we are very trustworthy in what we do and we are not breaking the systems. But now our software is in the live environment. So this is where we're taking that definition beyond production into the customer's hands, because the next thing we do is the monitoring and observability, and not just from is the system up, is the system performance perspective, but also to how is our customer reacting, how is our customer behavior changing, what do we think our customer is experiencing, and what can we learn about the value realization from that. So have we delivered on the hypothesis at the start from the portfolio backlog? And this is our feedback loop, that second way we talked about, where we are getting a shortened, amplified feedback loop, and that is going back into our ideas machine. So it could be, yes, we did improve the performance of the system, but only by 10%, where we thought it was going to be 15%, or we reduced the MTTR by a certain amount, but more or less than we said we would, or none. Or it could be, yes, that new feature, that new product, the customers are using it. 30% of the customers started using it in 4 hours, which is what we hoped for. So let's do more of that. But we're taking that feedback and it influences the next cycle. And this is the big point I'm trying to make here. This is a cycle. We're going round and round this value stream over and over, creating more value. So when we create efficiency in this value stream, we're able to put more value creation through it. And our customers realize more value and we become even more competitive. So it's not just about time, it is about effectiveness. So let's run through this in a bit more detail from a tooling perspective. So this is very much from a classic digital software oriented value stream, but you can think about this in lots of different ways, in lots of different value streams, about the different steps you've got and the different digital touch points that you might have in it. So in this one, we're talking about portfolio management. So we could have something like Jira up here, so Jira Portfolio Management and Jira itself for product backlog, and then we could have a collaborative wiki with something like Confluence perhaps, so 3 Atlassian tools, so that's nice and easy, all from one vendor. Oh, but wait, now we've got an artifact repository that's coming from JFrog. So do you remember when we talked about the Forrester definition of value stream management. They talked about how we needed to govern the heterogeneous tool chains. This is what we mean by heterogeneous tool chain. This is what we mean. We've got different tools from different vendors. We've got Bitbucket now for source and version control from Atlassian. Not that popular these days. And all the artifact repository source version control really got replaced by Git flavors of things. Everyone used to use Subversion. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but we've now moved to these kind of things. And things like CloudBees for CI. Then life gets really messy in DevOps tool chains when we get to the testing tools, because there are so many different flavors of code, and most different flavors of code need different flavors of testing tools. So here we've got NUnit for .NET unit testing, then we've got Jasmine for integration testing, Selenium for user acceptance testing. All of these could be, again, everything here is AI enabled. So it does annoy me when people talk about AI and software as like they're completely different things. I notice that the media tends to do it in particular in terms of trying to predict economic trends and trying to say that all the software companies are going to die because the AI companies are going to take over, seemingly conveniently forgetting that all of AI is actually software, and all of these software organizations are building AI into their tools, and you've already got these tools. So all you're going to do is engage and augment your existing processes with the AI capabilities that you're being provided with. But I'm not here to get on my AI horse today. So let's just say everything here is AI enabled. Then we're moving into things like non-functional testing for potentially security around things like using Sonatype, then using things like Ansible to manage environment and release automation. And then you'll likely have some kind of service desk, maybe something like ServiceNow, helping you manage your tickets and your problems in your instance. And then you've got logging, monitoring. You've got things like, Big Panda and Grafana, generative AI dashboards, analytics, things like that, getting you all of that feedback, helping you understand what's happening and moving those things back into the cycle. But it's complicated, isn't it? Because you've got more than one value stream, more than one DevOps toolchain in your organization, and they're different flavors. So, they look similar at first glance, but there are some differences here. Look, there's GitLab over here, for example, and actually you haven't got two, you've got quite a few going on, and they're all sort of different combinations of flavors. And even if you're really diving into platform engineering, that doesn't mean that you've got the same tool chain across your organization. It just means that you've centralized a team, so you're allowing your development teams to work more on differentiating features and spend less time trying to manage this tool chain because someone else is going to do it for them. Additionally, we've got these dependencies. Remember, we talked about all these dependencies and how these represent risks, for example. So if two people are trying to change this value stream over here, so there's a connection between these three, this now represents a risk. The AI could pick this up. Like quite often we see this break when these people are trying to make changes. This is your value stream network. Now you can see it represented as DevOps toolchains, because a DevOps toolchain is effectively a digital representation of a value stream because it's got every step. So what can you do if you're interested in taking this further? Well, first of all, I'd recommend that you think about how you would implement value stream management and where you might be on a roadmap like this. So you can start wherever you are. You can be completely project oriented today and you can still go on this journey, or you can have done 10 years of DevOps. It doesn't matter because you've got the value streams. So you can assess yourself. We have an assessment you can use at Flowtopia, or you can do it whatever way you like, but just try and help yourselves, your teams, and all your organisation as a whole understand what capabilities you've got now. Then outcome mapping. So if you're into flow engineering in particular, this is super important. Actually, it is important for everyone, is setting your vision and understanding why you are doing it. Then start to identify your value streams. You can start by identifying just one or two that are key and starting experimenting with them. But the next step really is to find the people that are involved with that value stream or those value streams that you've identified. And likely you will find they're coming from different teams. Most value stream exercises and engagements I've done, somebody at some point has told me that's the first time they've ever been in a room or in a virtual space with these particular people. They hadn't previously realised how interconnected they were. You can do mapping exercises, and once you do mapping exercises, you can also start using the technology to connect in the way that I just showed you, the way that you can see how your value stream interconnects from step to step. Once you have all of that, you can continually inspect and adapt, which gets you over one of the big lumps around traditional value stream mapping, which is the overhead of doing it frequently. You've already got it all digitized, so you can use that digitized version to help your teams continue, inspect and adapt. You don't have to be getting people in a room or in a virtual space for hours on end to be able to understand. Particularly now we have generative AI to give you advice and agentic AI that can make all the data connect and give you the insights. So here's a quick tool that you could use for that first step in terms of assessing where you are. This is a capability matrix. It's fairly easy to interpret, but down the left-hand side in purple, we have the different dimensions, and along the top, we have the capability ranging from emerging to the higher end on the right to evolving. So if we picked one line, let's pick for fun the DevOps toolchain dimension. Somebody who is just emerging, we would say, is just now building continuous integration, but if they've got a higher level of capability, they're starting to use continuous delivery. Higher still, they have architected from idea to realization, so they understand all of those steps. And if they are evolving, they can trace work around the entire cycle. So they have automated that value stream map, and it is AI enabled. If you want a deeper level of assessment, we do this with comparative agility. You can find it on the platform. It is a value stream management assessment there, so please do give that a go. As it said on the previous slides, you can do this lightweight, you can do it heavyweight, you can configure it to ask whichever many questions you want. You can do it on your own, or you can ask us at Flowtopia to give you some support, either running the assessment and or interpreting the results and figuring out what to do with them, which of course is the key. And if you want to know more about any element of this, then a really good place to find out is, of course, Flowtopia itself, but also on June the 24th, we have Flowtopia Live, which is our annual flagship event. It's 12 hours long. If you buy the Velocity Pass, you will be able to get 90 days of on-demand content from it as well, and if you become a Flow Pro member, you'll have it for as long as you're a Flow Pro member. But we will have 12 hours of content, 50 speakers, including comparative agility, on all sorts of topics relating to this. So if you've got any questions or want to learn more, that's a great place to go. But for now, that is it from me for today. So I would like to thank Amra and the team very much for this opportunity to speak with everybody, and thank you for your time and for listening, and say that I hope to see you in Flowtopia soon. Thank you and goodbye.